what I want to talk about today is conflict in that community and why relationships are so hard in the local church, but yet they are so vital. We are seeing a resurgence and a revival of people getting back to that authentic community, but it is hard.
Right.
And I think it's one of the things that leads to major conflict, people church hopping, people leaving churches, people getting upset, whatever it may be. And so we forget, like, man, our modern context has been shaped by the Industrial Revolution. We have a very individualistic culture. I want to get to the root of some of these issues and talk about why this is a struggle, and why it's vital that we address this struggle. All right. So, serious question, Tyler.
Okay.
When we were talking about this off air as we get ready to jump into this episode, tell me about Crocs, man.
Crocs. You see, I had a pair of Crocs once when I was in like 3rd grade, and somehow everybody.
Have they been around that long?
Dude, I had a blue pair. My dad ruined them when he was staying in
What?
the deck. I got stain all over them. Anyway.
You can't ruin a pair of Crocs, though.
Indestructible.
Indestructible, bro. Tell me about these little, the little, what is
yeah,
it, like the
yeah.
little
Let's talk about
toe emblems.
So you can accessorize. You can buy these things that go in the holes of your Crocs.
The Crocs, yeah.
Yeah, we'll put an image up. And but you can buy some that look like toes. So like, it looks like just some nasty toes coming out of the top of your Crocs here, and that's what our students wear on Wednesday nights in their pajamas.
This is a major problem. I'll tell you another
major problem in student
major
ministry.
problem you are facing in student ministry is kids wearing socks in the swimming pool.
Yeah.
Bro, I saw that last year, and I'm like, what are we doing to our kids?
It's
this generation, they don't want to crease their shoes, and they don't want to show people. And I think
dogs.
their excuse, it's called dogs. My 9-year-old son, that's what he calls them.
Your dogs.
That's what he calls them, is dogs. And they said, man, I'm not letting my dogs get taken. I guess it's a thing to take a picture of people's dogs, a.k.a. feet, for those of you who speak actual language, English language. Yeah, words. Like, what is wrong with people, man? What are we doing?
I mean, I guess we really need to ask ourselves who let the dogs out.
That's great. Hey, guys, welcome to the podcast, Rooted, where we talk about
real stuff,
man, real issues, like middle schoolers wearing socks in a swimming pool. Man, I feel like that's a hazard, bro.
It's bad.
We got to put an end to this.
That's some bad news.
Help us. Hashtag end the socks in the pool.
Yeah, it's weird.
Bro, what are we doing? If you are a parent of a student who wears their socks, man,
Have a conversation.
Have the conversation.
Call your youth pastor.
Confront, man. It's a serious discipleship issue, man.
You need to confront it.
Yeah, dude.
We need to confess it.
And we need to construct it. Come on, man. Come on. Preach
Let's
that.
go.
Hey, Tyler just gave us our introduction. Welcome to Rooted.
Yeah.
Where we talk about real issues, get to the root of the problem, and that's what we do. We confront it, we confess, and we construct, and that's how we want to do it, man. We want to help people find freedom. Today's episode, man, I think it's a very important one. It's something that our church kind of, really in the last few years, we have tried to make it the center of who we are. We talk all the time about church around a table versus church around a stage. I just believe community is vital. But what I want to talk about today is conflict in that community, and why relationships are so hard in the local church, but yet they are so vital. Because I think we are seeing a resurgence and a revival of people getting back to that authentic community, but it is hard.
Right.
It is like one of the most daunting things that we are finding as we lead our church through this, through basically getting people to prioritize community outside of Sunday. You're finding, man, we are rubbing up against a culture that's been created, and I think it's one of the things that leads to major conflict, people church hopping, people leaving churches, people getting upset, whatever it may be. And so I just want to I want to get to the root of some of these issues and talk about why this is a struggle, and why it's vital that we address this struggle. And so we're going to kind of talk about some root issues that surround biblical conflict and biblical community, because I think if you're on here, you've probably experienced at some point some sort of conflict in church, and that's either caused you to walk away from church or it's caused you just to be a church attender. You're just like, like, I'm not going to get to know nobody, and I don't want anybody knowing me. Like, it gets messy, right? It's too messy. It's too hard, right? And so that's the kind of stuff we want to talk about. And I think a lot of it, we don't understand how some of this stuff has been shaped for decades. Decades. I mean, you got to think, there was a time, even in this city, right? There was a time, because have you ever asked yourself, while you're driving out in the middle of the country and you'll run across a random church, you're like, how did that church get built here? And then you'll drive, because like in Portland, it's easy for us to go like, man, there is a church, like literally, you just throw a rock, there's a church. And what we forget is there was a time when like people did everything in community. And so you would have a family that owned this property. They farmed. You had farmers, that owned the property next to them. They would own some acreage. And you got to think, didn't have cars or vehicles weren't like a main part of transportation. They rode horses, buggies, walked, all the things. And they did everything with their neighbors. If your neighbor needed help bringing their crop in, you're going to help that neighbor, right? And so they would build houses of worship. And so you walked to church, and you basically went to church with the people that you were neighbors with. And that's why you see, it's almost like that Little House on the Prairie type thing. I don't know if you ever watched that. That's probably a reference that's outside your time. I don't even know. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
Okay. I was trying to think, like, man, have you seen Rugrats? Like, I don't know. But anyways, but it's kind of that thing, right? Like, and I think that's what we don't understand about Portland is like, in our context, if you live in a rural town, you're going to see that. You're going to see churches because somebody built that, because at the time, that's how people chose a church. You didn't choose a church because it's like, man, that was closest to the Applebee's, or the Texas Roadhouse, or that's close to my shop, because that is the modern. That's the modern method. It's like, I want to choose a church that has all the amenities that I like. Oh, and by the way, it's not uncommon for people to drive outside of their community to attend a church based on some things that really, at the core of it, it's not, this is where my neighbors go, or this is where my people go. And not necessarily good or bad. I'm just saying this is the reality we're in. And so we forget, like, man, our modern context has been shaped by the Industrial Revolution. There was a time when the family all worked in the home. So, like, even the wife and the kids, they would help the dad with the crops, they'd do whatever. The mom was normally like a caretaker of the home. The dad worked, but he was close. And so the family unit was close. When the Industrial Revolution happened, the dad began to work outside the home. And then that created like a missing dad type concept. Like, he might have been there, but not there. Does that make sense? Because now, like, we've figured out ways to make more money, work longer hours, blah, blah, blah. And then you fast forward to the technology, generation, right? All of these over the last 100 years or so, has shaped how we do community. And it's been like this slow fade where, like we had a time when like this was just natural. Family unit was important. Neighbor. Now that's not even important. Like, your family, most people when they graduate high school, they're not thinking, how do I make decisions that best suits not only my future, but the future for my family. You don't make decisions like that anymore. Like, it's like, I'm gone. And the reason for that is because we have a very individualistic culture. And our culture is like, man, it's about finding my happiness, my success. I got to find what's good for me. I got to do for me, right? You think about marriage, job, school, almost everything. And that's why people are getting married at an older age now. Some of them are even bypassing marriage. It's amazing how many people are bypassing having kids, because it is all about, like, I don't want anything to interfere with me getting to my place of success, comfort, whatever. I don't want anything hindering me. And so the things that we once valued, now we don't value because it's very individualistic. Well, that has crept.
Yeah.
Has crept.
Has crept. That sounds good.
Hey, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I got
Tom.
you.
Look at you with the grammar
words,
stuff.
man.
Come
They're
on,
all
man.
right. They treat me all right sometimes.
It has crept into the church too. Like it has affected the modern
Yeah.
church. And so, and I think some of that is too, like, I mean, you go back to the Jim Crow era. I mean, like, we don't even realize how all of that type of stuff with the racial divide, how that has affected the modern church too.
Mhm.
Because, you know, you have basically these segments in cities where it's like, man, here we are in 2024, you know, and we are still affected by the Jim Crow days, where there are still churches that are all black or churches that are all Hispanic, and in rural areas, churches are predominantly white.
Mhm.
Like, we don't even realize, like, man, we are a product of some messed up theology, messed up community type stuff, right? And so we're living in that now.
Mm-hmm.
And so to address the root, you know, you can't just say, like, how do we get people to come to church, or how do we get people to join a small group? We have to ask the question, what are some of the indicators that have got us here? And I have to go back and address those things. And so in doing that, I have to, how do we teach our church the value of family and neighbor and community and life together? That's what we're really trying to address.
Well, let's be honest. A lot of us probably don't like our neighbor. A lot of us can't probably stand our family.
Come on, bro.
And so it's like,
that's real.
It is very real. You know, get out of my yard, you know, or whatever mentality. And it's like, oh, so what you're talking now, I'm going to have to, and so it's uncomfortable.
It's super uncomfortable. So this is where we're at. You know, and you think about the role that social media plays. I know we talked about social media in the last episode, but it's huge too. A lot of people, it is amazing to me how many people probably never sit in a room like this with a small group of people and bare their soul. But there are people who, like, I'm surprised how many people will bare their soul on social. Like, bro, you posted that?
That's what I don't understand. You told 1,000 people this.
That you barely know.
Yeah.
And then people are getting on there and they're just like, they're ripping you, or they're giving it, and then you're upset because, like, why are you, you know, confronting me? And it's like, bro, you just, like,
you won't tell 3 people what you told 3,000.
I'm, like, in shock by stuff like that.
It's crazy.
You know? But what we have done is, like, we don't realize, like, this is now the arena in which we are experiencing community. And so it's funny because it's like, even the word friend has no value, right? It's like, how many friends do you have on Facebook?
Yeah.
And then how many people
real
like,
friends?
Listen, I'm going to be really honest, right? This is a show where we talk about confronting, confessing, right?
And
here's a confession.
Let's hear it.
9 times out of 10, when I add new friends, I immediately unfollow them.
Yes. On Facebook, 100%. Friend, boom, unfollow. I don't want to see your stuff, bro. I don't know you, man.
Especially, like, if I'm like, okay, like, I'll look at their profile and scroll down, like, nah, I ain't trying to see all that.
No,
Like,
you post too much.
I'll be your friend, let you know, like, hey, it's cool. Like,
you're a member of Hit Portland? Nope. Some of y'all know. Y'all know.
You know. And we're joking, but, like, my thing is like, man, this is not my community.
Yeah.
You know, this is, I don't find my sense of value or community being on social media. I think there are methods and tools in which social media can be good, but finding your community there is not one of them. And it's crazy how we have called that community. You know, you hear about, like, well, I joined the runners group community. I've joined. Those things are great, but it's not the place. Like, you're not hopping on your 5K community on Facebook going, hey, guys, let me tell you something. I've been struggling with pornography.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, bro, we're just trying to post where the next half marathon is.
Time.
Yeah, yeah. So even that, like, we have categories of community. It's like, well, join the gun club, or join this club, or join this group. And that's good stuff. But it's not the deep biblical community that we're called to be a part of. You know, because Scripture is very clear when it says that when you come to Christ, you are actually invited, you're being brought into a new family with Christ as the head of that family. And, you know, so that's why, like, if people really don't know the Christian lingo, you hear people call each other brother and sister.
Yes.
That's why it's not, it's not because, we're all from South Alabama. It's because, like, we are now a part of this family together, this spiritual family.
Mm-hmm.
We're being brought into this family. And so it's like we're having to relearn how to be a part of a healthy spiritual family. And like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head. If you did not come from a healthy family background, that sounds really not only foreign to you.
You're running.
But yeah, it's unwanted.
Yeah, I don't want
You're
that.
like, I don't, and you think, I don't need it.
Mm-hmm. We were just talking, we've been going through the book of Mark and Mark in our D group. And even Jesus.
You say the book of Marky Mark?
Marky Mark? Did I say Marky Mark? Did not mean to. Did
okay.
I say that? No.
It's just,
book of Mark.
It's fine. Some of y'all don't even know who Marky Mark is. You know Mark Wahlberg, but you don't know Marky Mark.
I did not mean to say that.
That's all right.
The book of
the
Mark.
Book of Marky. Hey, it's fine.
Even Jesus.
It's whatever.
We're real here. Even Jesus.
Hey, in the book of Marky Mark, it's nothing but good vibrations. Go ahead.
Just good vibes.
Some of y'all get that, some of you won't.
I'm one of them.
Look it up later.
Look it up. Even Jesus talked about that when his own family didn't really want much of what he was doing, and then it's like, hey, my family are a part of this kingdom.
The ones who do the will of God.
Yes,
right? The
it's
ones
like,
who do
that's
the will
my
of
brother,
Father.
that's my mother, that's my sister, and like even Jesus, even his own, he had some issues with his own personal family.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, absolutely. And so I think ministry leaders, here is the main problem. Like, ministry leaders are not leading the way. Even in the context of our church, I've seen pastors have given me this advice. They've said, don't be friends with people in the church. They're only going to hurt you. They're only going to stab you in the back. And like, these are people who are leading a flock. They're shepherding a group of people, and yet not even knowing what they smell like.
Wow.
I love what my friend Miguel Rojas, he pastors in Costa Rica. He's part of our missions. He's actually going to be at our church this weekend. But he said, man, a pastor should smell like his flock. In other words, they've been with them. They've been around them. They encounter their problems. They encounter what's going on with them. And I think what we see out of church now is the leader is so far removed from any kind of community within the church. They find that most pastors today find their community outside the church. And that is, to me, that is alarming. And it speaks to, like, man, we have nobody leading the way of showing people how to actually do this, right? And so our response to pain, conflict, and community is important. And it's important that as ministry leaders, especially, that we teach people how to respond to those things, how to interact with those things. And I tell people this, our theology should determine our experiences in community. Our experiences in community should never determine our theology. So for instance, that person that says, don't be friends with people in church, they're only going to hurt you. What they're saying is, I've been hurt. Therefore, now that is shaping my theology and what I believe about community. And I think there's some kind of weird, like, I don't know why in the world people think that you're not going to ever experience any kind of hurt in relationship. I mean, even if you're married and you have a strong marriage, there is some point where you've hurt the other person, they've hurt you. There's been a disagreement, there's been a conflict, there's been a tension, there's been something said, something done that was like, there's never a pain-free experience in relationships. And so it's amazing to me how I think there's like this weird imagination that when you come into church community, because it's a church, there should never be anybody who's going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, offend you, hurt you, or vice versa. It's interesting how we always expect other people to be the offenders, but we never ask ourselves, how many times have I been the offender?
That's good.
How many times have I hurt somebody, said something wrong, done whatever?
Well, we forget about that common grace that we were talking about earlier this week.
Yeah.
About like, hey, the same grace that needs to be applied to them has been applied to me too.
Applied to you.
And it's like we forget that sometimes.
Yes. And so what we actually encounter are a ton of emotionally immature leaders when it comes to community. They don't know how to handle conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us, you were probably raised up in a completely different environment. I mean, I don't know if you want to share, like, how did you view conflict as a kid in your house? What was conflict like?
Man, I mean,
I know we're putting your mom
yeah,
and dad
yeah,
on
yeah.
the spot. We love Phyllis
Shout
and
out Big
Rob. They're
Rob.
amazing.
No,
Big Rob.
how I think sometimes maybe address conflict like biblically. I remember my dad sometimes coming. It's like, man, you put me on the spot. Be petty. Let's do this. All right. Addressing biblical like content. My goodness, conflict
yeah.
biblically. There we go. It's like because sometimes I heard stories. I'm grateful that my parents shared some things in front of me because I don't. If they didn't. Like conflict that I see now in the church, I'd be like, "What in the world?" But it's like it's part of the organization. It happens. It's real. But how we respond to that, I think a lot of the conflict that I saw from like the church and pastor was more so like.
Well, no, I'm talking about even like
Just
in
general.
your home.
Oh, okay.
Like, what was conflict like? Because I imagine like your mom and dad aren't perfect.
No,
but I don't think there was violence in your house.
No, my dad was an amazing father.
Yeah.
He treated my mom amazing. But like I did see sometimes tendencies of like isolation or like nothing wrong with like, hey, I need a few minutes, but like running from conflict in a degree of like, I don't want to talk about this right now. They handled conflict very well. And honestly, I'm trying to think of like, man, where did they really screw it up?
Well, I'm not even trying to ask that. I'm just saying like your experience and my experience completely different.
For sure.
One of your parents are still together.
Yes.
Man, they love one another. They're incredible parents. And so the way you view conflict was a lot different. And so for me, like that's what I saw. I saw violence. I heard violence. I heard yelling. I heard, this was the norm. And so the point is like all of us, and when you get into church leadership, we have been formed over the years on what conflict, how we respond to that.
I feel like I know where we're tracking now. Like my parents, they addressed stuff. Like they talked about it, they hashed it out, they did the thing. Whereas like, and they did it in front of me. Which again, you can have whatever view on it. But like my wife, Lindsay, like she didn't see a lot of that. Her parents arguing or whatever. Whatever. But those are some things that we were trying to figure out. Whereas like she didn't see her parents arguing stuff a lot. And I did, not a lot, but like I saw that when it's like, so when we would get in arguments, it's like Lindsay would think something's wrong, or because she didn't see that. Where I was like, hey, this is part of it, So.
No, and that's good. And so now fast forward and put that in context of the community you experience in church. Like what we forget is like, we're all having to relearn how to actually do community. We're having to relearn what conflict really is. For me, conflict was danger, danger, danger. For you, it was like, hey, conflict happens, but we're going to deal with it.
It's all good.
For Lindsay, it's like there's conflict, but we're not going to do it in front of, so.
But it's because of what her parents were.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so there's all of that. You're bringing that to the table.
Yeah.
When you're coming to church with people. And so now put that in a sense of like, 1,300 people on a weekend, and you're building relationships with people. You're getting to know people. All of this is brought to the table. All of this. And so what we tend to do is like, man, if we ever feel uncomfortable because we're not used to having to like really be honest about how we feel about a situation, because, hey, if we do that, that could create conflict, and conflict is bad. That's danger. I'm going to run from that. That's an MO for some people. And so if I feel any kind of type of way, instead of actually addressing it, I'll just go to another church because that's easier, or I'll just find a new group of friends. And so this is some of the dynamics that's happening in the church too. And so if you can scroll back up. No, the other way. Yeah. So when we talk about, even I've had a lot of church leaders ask me, like, how do you respond when people leave the church over conflict? How do we heal as leaders? Because I tell people all the time, like, church consumerism is killing the church's witness. And And here's what I'll say and I'm just being really honest. You know, it's funny because people talk about, well, I don't go to church because I've been hurt. Like, I've been hurt by the church. Bro, me too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the pastor.
Yeah.
You know, and I think for me, and we'll talk about this as we dive into this a little bit deeper. The hard part is like, man, for some people, they can just pack up and go and never say a word. I have to show back up and preach the next week.
Man. Yeah.
You know?
I'm up.
And there's been times when it's like, man, I don't even want to show up today, you know, because, you know, so-and-so, they just disappeared. I mean, I've had people who were like my kids' small group leaders. Mm-hmm. And, man, they're, hey, where's so-and-so? Like, when that's your kids asking, then you have to be honest with them. Well, you know, they left. They went to a different church. Not always a bad thing. Yeah. But it's like they didn't even value the relationship enough to say goodbye, to say why we're leaving, all this. And so and that's, I'm not trying to elevate like, oh, woe was me. What I'm trying to say is like, it's across the board. Yeah. Like everybody experiences it at some point. Mm-hmm. And so I can do one of two things, right? I can be like, well, we're not building friends with people in the church because like our kids are just going to get left in the dirt by people who claim to be small group leaders and they're going to turn around and leave, blah, blah, blah. Or I can say, Jesus, teach me how to lead others through this. Yeah. And how to navigate this in a healthy way to where I don't become bitter, but I become better.
I think that's good.
Because to love is to be vulnerable. To be vulnerable is to put yourself in a position to be hurt. Mm. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not willing to be like Christ. Yeah. Because that's exactly what Jesus did.
I think we see some of that a lot in student ministry too. I remember, I'm thinking of a young man right now who had a small group leader for probably, an extensive period of time from like 3 to 5 years. And then, out of nowhere, you know, it's like, hey, where's so-and-so? And it hurt him and it wounded him. And it actually, like, I don't think we realize there is so much ripple effect down the road to where it even put like this wall. And like, praise the Lord, now we've had some really good conversations with that student to me because he thought I was gonna do the same thing. I'm not gonna get close to you or be vulnerable because you're just gonna dip out one day and not say anything. And I remember the conversation. He was very much so like, hey man, you didn't want to say goodbye or something? And like, it's just easier to just go on.
And that's so good, man, because I think, you know, now you're given an opportunity to help navigate that student through like life. Like this is real life, you know, and it's probably not the first time he's going to experience some sort of, man, somebody let me down. Yeah. Even if sometimes like that's not even the reality, but it's how you felt, right? Because it's not all the time that, man, somebody let you down or somebody dipped on you. It's how we personally receive that in the moment, you know? And so I think what we have done is we have fallen in love with the idea of community. And I think that's why social media is easier, right? Because, man, I can dip when I want to, and it's not going to hurt anybody's feelings. I can show up when I want to, say the things that, you know, I can talk about certain things if I want to, not talk about them. So there's something that is difficult when we start navigating, like, man, what it means to really live in biblical community. Mm-hmm. So, like, when you read the New Testament, here is the foundation for New Testament community when it comes to the church. Like, think about these. Here are some of the qualities. Prayer, the Lord's Supper, which is when you gather together. Like, here's what people miss about the Lord's Supper. It never started as a like an event of like, hey, take a cracker and some wine, whatever. It actually started as a meal. Like if you go to 1st, 2nd Corinthians, when Paul's addressing how they were like treating the Lord's Supper, it was actually a meal. And his condemnation of them was, hey, all of you wealthy people are getting there first and you're eating all the food. And then the poor show up, they got nothing to eat. Not only do they have nothing to eat, but you guys are drunk off all the wine. And so, like, even the Lord's Supper was something that brought people to a table for community. Mm-hmm. It was a moment that we were going to share a meal and remember what Christ did and proclaim the gospel through this meal. Like, that's fascinating. Yeah. That even the Lord's Supper, we've kind of watered it all the way down to like a quick, take the cup, the bread, get out of here and go home.
Convenient. And I even think too, it's like even going to that, like, let's say I come over, whatever, and I was having a conversation with someone at youth conference. It's like, would it be awkward if I'm like, hey man, I come over, the first thing, or you come in my house and the first thing we do is partake in the Lord's Supper? And he's like, yeah, that'd probably be kind of weird. Because it's like, but it's like, why is it weird? Like, why we made these things weird?
Yeah, man. So then you have scripture reading, and studying. Like this was a part of like we gathered for these purposes, prayer, the Lord's Supper, scripture reading, studying, generosity and shared resources. It was like, man, who needs help? If there's somebody needs help, we're going to do what it takes to help them. This is my neighbor. This is my family. These are the, God's blessed me with the resources. I'm going to do it. Right. Worship, that was whether it was singing, declaring praises to the Lord, or just gathering together for prayer, whatever. Like there was a sense of gathering for worship, accountability, rebuke, and responsibility. Like that's throughout the New Testament of like, man, we are to help hold each other accountable because we're all striving towards living for the Lord. We're all striving to obey the teachings of Jesus. That was at the core of community. Confession and reconciliation. Like that's throughout. It's like, man, hey, rebuke in love, but also be ready to receive your brother back.
Yeah.
Also be ready to forgive. High grace and forgiveness. Restoration to community. Like that was at the core of the foundation of the New Testament church. Peace and nonviolence at the core of the New Testament church. Simplicity and quiet living. Like, hey man, we're not out here trying to like make a big name for ourselves. We're keeping we're going to honor the government. We're going to do what we're supposed to do. We're going to live faithfully. We're going to share the gospel everywhere we go.
Yeah.
And that alone changed the world as we knew it back then. Unreal, right? Caring for the vulnerable. Like that was unheard of. Widows were normally cast aside to the lowest denominator of the poorest of the poor. That's why the book of Ruth is phenomenal to watch unfold. It's actually a picture of taking care of the vulnerable. It's actually a picture of the gospel, the whole book. So the widow, the orphan, the homeless, like whoever the vulnerable are, there was a sense of we have a responsibility to care for them. And then there was always someone who knows the 3%. That's what we talk about in men's ministry all the time. The 3% is like most of us will sit in a group and we'll share problems, but there's 3% that nobody knows that we are afraid to share. And I think to find true freedom, there has to be somebody that knows the 3%.
And we've witnessed this freedom.
100%.
And that's where it's like, I think that freedom is so contagious. And it's like, I mean, we witnessed this not too long ago.
Back in October.
For like 6 hours of grown men confessing and talking about
deep stuff.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm not going to get into, but the 3%. And it's like, but it was so pure and but I'm going to go home and I'm going to talk to my wife and I've been struggling with this and it's like a group rallied around them and encouraged them to have those conversations.
And you know what I noticed? Out of probably 98% of the guys that shared is that they are today involved in deep community.
Yes.
That vulnerability, that authenticity, that confession actually drew them closer to people.
And because they tasted that freedom.
Yeah, man. So now let's contrast that. Let's contrast that to the foundation of cultural community. There is a shared individualistic pursuit. And so it's like, I will get together with other people as long as they are helping me pursue my individualistic pursuit. When I was a kid, there was a lot of community clubs. There was the YMCA, and the YMCA always had like tons of different clubs you could join. I was a part of what was called the Cub Scouts. I don't know if anybody remembers the Cub Scouts. I wasn't a Boy Scout, but I was in the Cub Scouts. I don't even know what the difference is today. Like I think we were just like they didn't teach us how to do cool stuff. We just made crafts or whatever. I don't know. I never got to learn how to make a fire, out of a piece of paper and a rubber band.
You colored a fire.
Yeah, I colored a fire and shot rubber bands. But anyways, but there was a lot of things you could join as a kid. Those things have died. I don't know if anybody's noticed that, but like a lot of community programs are now dying out. And what has replaced it is travel sports, entertainment. And so like people are so engulfed in media, social media, streaming devices, whatever, or they are engulfed in living out their individualistic pursuit of trying to achieve through athletics, academics, music. But there's no sense of even like, man, I'm doing this through community. It's like, man, I don't even know these people, but they can help me or my kid get to where I want to go.
It's crazy.
And spend thousands of dollars to do it.
We will let a stranger convince us to drop our nets and pursue this.
Yeah, man.
Life, literally, finance, all the things, and commit to this life-altering lifestyle. But we will question dropping our nets for the sake of Jesus.
Look, I'm going to say this, and listen, I have dear friends. This is not a slam. I'm not saying it's a slam. I have dear friends that their kids are involved in travel sports. I think travel sports is a racket. It is nothing but money. Because you look at how expensive it is to do it. These people do not care about your kids.
No.
They care about making money. Most of them care about making money, and most of them care about somehow making up for some sort of success they didn't have for themselves, and so they're trying to live it out through their kids. That's just my opinion. Take it to the bank, whatever. But my opinion is truth. Anyways, here we go.
I'm saying.
So this is kind of replaced. So this shared individualist pursuit is like, man, I'm pursuing this, but you can help me get here. So therefore, I'll bring you into my community.
Yeah.
Does this make sense? So as people pursue the American dream, they do so on their own or with people who can give them a step toward it. And so the result is this: loneliness, despair, divorce, suicide, porn addiction. They have high Christian identity, but low discipleship. And this is what we're seeing played out in our culture. This is just in the church.
Yeah. Which is why I just shared this with our students not too long ago. It's like the Bible is in the Guinness Book of World Records.
Yeah, man.
For the most copies sold. Like the book.
It's the best-selling book of all time.
All time.
And least read. What we see in the church is low grace and forgiveness. Most people will cut you off from community at the sign of the first failure. So there's nobody showing how to restore, reconcile, walk through conflict in a healthy way. That there are more Christians who throw out the word karma than they do grace. And karma is a Buddhist term. It's not even a Christian term. There are people who seek self-affirmation over accountability. They don't want people to hold them accountable. They want people to affirm them in every decision they make. I've seen people online post about, I'm talking about just dogging their husbands out.
Yeah.
And friends like, that's right, girl. My husband too. And I'm like, how is this healthy for any? And these are people who call themselves Christians.
Right.
And so there's like this thing where you just want people to affirm. Like, where are the people going like, bro, get off the internet.
Yeah,
unplug
that's
everything in your house. You have just like done something incredibly foolish, you know? But there's nobody doing that, you know? And so the thought process is, as long as you don't infringe on my truth, we can get along. But the moment you mess with my version of the truth, you're canceled.
Yeah.
You're out of here. And I'm just talking about the church. This happens in the church. No one really knows the 30%, much less the 3%.
That's good.
And so our cultural MO, here's what happens, is find people like you who like you.
Yeah.
Or leave. And you just don't see that in Scripture. In fact, here's what's crazy about the New Testament church and how it was formed. People forget because we don't put ourselves in that context. You had Jews who were coming to know Christ, who all they knew was Judaism. They were raised on the Torah, raised in Jewish beliefs, Jewish customs, dietary restrictions, all this stuff. And then you had these Gentiles who were pagans, didn't know the Torah, didn't know the Hebrew Bible, and they're coming to faith in Christ. Oh, and by the way, they all now have to mesh and live together. And so a lot of the issues that Paul and Peter and the New Testament, they're always addressing is the messiness of these people come and say, hey, you need to uphold these Jewish traditions. I don't even know what those Jewish traditions are.
Yeah.
Do I have to do that and follow Jesus? Do I have to, is it place your faith in Christ and hold on to the law? Like, it was a mess. People from different nationalities, tongues, ethnicities, all coming together in one place to worship Jesus. That was absolutely messy.
Chaos.
Which is why Paul had to like write some letters, right? And so we forget, like, oh, wow, this thing started with a sense of like, I have to like learn how to get along with people that are different than me. Because at the core of it, this isn't about my individualist pursuits. It's about knowing Christ and building the kingdom with other people who should believe like me that, man, what unifies us is the blood of Christ. What unifies us is the mission of the gospel. And if I forget that, then what kingdom am I really trying to build?
I was about to say that alone should be enough of what you just said.
It should. But because we have confused what community is, again, it's how does it help me and that's why people don't see church as important.
Yeah.
It doesn't really help me in my individual pursuit. It's not helping. Like this other thing though that happens on Sundays, that's getting me where I want to go.
Yeah.
And so because we have not allowed Jesus to transform our minds, then our thought process, it's like we come to Christ, but we still have the same thought process when it comes to community.
Yeah.
And it's usually based off of the experience. Again, our experiences begin to shape our theology instead of our theology shape our experiences.
So good.
And so when you talk about church dynamics and you think about how this stuff happened with the Jews and the Gentiles, like the church is truly supposed to be the example of what it means of bringing all nations and tongues together, all backgrounds. In America, though, we can't even bring ethnicities or voting registrations together.
Goodness.
Like, think about that. Like, I mean, you have people that refuse to go to church with Republicans or refuse to go to church with Democrats, or like politics has become the fastest growing religion in America. And so, like, there's a concept there. Like, I love what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said. He's like, if you really want to find community, you first have to kill your idea of community. Because you will want to fall in love with this idea of what community should be, and when that fails you, and when that doesn't live up to your ideal, you'll refrain from it. To be in biblical community is hard.
Yeah.
You know, because when you start reading scriptures like, man, you know, be quick to forgive one another, don't be offended easily, you know, reconcile. That sounds really lovey-dovey until you have to do it. Right. It's like, the only way that I can learn what reconciliation means is to actually be given an opportunity to be reconciled. The only way I can learn what forgiveness means is to actually be given an opportunity to forgive. It's like the whole thing. Have you ever heard of like, hey, man, I'm just praying for patience, right? What do people say?
You sure you want to pray for that?
Yeah. Why? Because in order to learn patience, what do you have to do?
Yeah. You have to be in situations where you're going to have
your patience tested. Yeah. And that's what we forget is like, man, like it's hard, but it's worth it.
It is. And I think even the whole concept of this conversation and why we're even having these things, like, it's hard, it's going to take work, it's worth it, it's going to take time, you know? And I think because of the world that we live in today with quick fixes, I can have this here right now. I don't have to talk to you if I don't want to. I can block you. I can do all these things. Yeah. That's what we're up against with the world and the church. And so those come into play with the church. Nope, I don't want, or I'll go somewhere else. I'll do this or whatever.
Well, we forget too, like, how we even were taught to form. Like, most of us don't know how to form community because all of your life as a kid, if you went to public school, your community was basically chosen for you.
Right.
Think about all your friends you grew up with. It was probably because why? You had classes with them or you played sports with them. So you were put in an arena where they were already there. So when you leave high school, it's no wonder that the greatest rate of depression is males between 18 and 35. Why? Because now they have no idea how to actually choose community for themselves.
Or I had my church friends, I
Yeah.
had my sports friends, and I had my school friends, and I didn't talk to my church friends at school because I didn't want my church friends knowing what I was doing. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
like, I didn't.
Yeah, it's compartmentalized.
Exactly.
Right. And so when you live a life that's compartmentalized, at some point, that stuff all interacts together, and you're like, I don't know what to do with this.
Right.
And so we don't even teach people how to form community. You just think it's going to happen. And so that's why as adults, most people are lonely because now you don't have we're all going to the same place at the same time 5 days out of the week or whatever it may be. And so then, we try to fulfill that with just, well, I'll have a family. And then like over the years, all those things, it still doesn't fulfill the biblical need for community because even having a family, you need other people to help. Like you hear the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Like that's a proverb, but it's like there's a truth to that.
100%.
Like, man, I want to be around people. Like what's cool is I have friends, they have sons at the same age. They have daughters the same age. And so what's cool is like, man, we have conversations about how we're raising our kids, how we're teaching our kids, the types of conversations we're having with them. Like that's a beautiful gift that the church offers. It's like, man, I found people that are striving to live for the Lord, guiding their kids towards Jesus. Now, here's what I'll say. You can be in church and still struggle to find that.
Yeah.
Because in honest reality, just because a family's going to church doesn't mean they're trying to teach their kids how to follow Jesus.
Man.
And so I think that's why it's important that ministry leaders model this.
Yes.
They show it. They teach people. But we've been conditioned to like, man, once I leave that space, the only space I know is online. I think that's why fraternities and sororities, like, here's the thing about that. Like, there's some value to those things, but in all honesty, like I was talking to my buddy Josh, and he's like, man, I might talk to one person that I was in fraternity with, and that's a rare occasion. And then you think about like, man, you had to pay for friends. Fraternities are sororities are basically you paying for friends. That's what it is.
Man.
Again, not knocking you if you went through a fraternity or sorority. I'm just saying, like, we are trying to find every alternative community except for the community that God says, this is what I'm inviting you into. And this is what I've given you, right? And so, we talked about the church hurt conversation, especially as a pastor. Like, again, I get so many pastors and ministry leaders. It's like, man, how you navigate this. I think you have to remind people, like, man, it's going to, like, I don't want to ever experience that kind of pain again, or people, it's going to happen. And so I have to already in my mind tell myself my theology must shape my experience. This experience cannot shape my theology. If I do, I'm going to miss out even myself on finding life-giving community because I'm already assuming you're going to hurt me. And I think there's like this thing within us that says, man, like if this person likes me, they're always going to be in my life. I love what Jenny Allen said. My wife's a big Jenny Allen fan. She listens to her podcasts a lot. But she talked about how like sometimes friends are for seasons. Like you had friends as a teenager that you're not friends with as an adult. You had friends in your young adult years you don't. But I think there's a time in life. I tell people, man, I'm on this lifelong journey to find my 8. Who are the 8 guys that will carry my casket? And hopefully it's the 8 guys that helped carry me through life.
That's good.
That they'll help carry me after death.
Yeah.
That, man, they're going to look out for my wife and my kids. I'm going to assuming and pray that I go first, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't. But it's like that's the kind of stuff we don't think about in our 20s and 30s.
Right.
And then so we get to 40, and most men, especially, I'm harping on men because this happens a lot with men. I know it happens with women too, but men especially, most men do not have deep relationships. They almost think it's like the unmanly thing to do, but it's also what they don't realize, the thing it's missing that's causing them loneliness, depression, and discouragement and all other things.
It's the very thing that they need, and it's like you can almost see it sometimes. Like I want to just encourage men, and I know I might be younger than you or whatever, but like your sons look at you the way that you treat your wife. Your sons look at you the way that you engage in worship and in church, and it's like far too often sometimes it's like we run from the response time.
Yeah, man.
And it's like, oh, pastor's challenging me. Oh, no, we got to get up and go. I even we see it here too. It's like, and I see the man actually leading their family out of the auditorium when it comes to that moment in time because we're scared of it or we're running from it.
Well, and I think in the church world, I think what's happened too, the reason why we see this, because I feel like in today's church, no one leaves a church in a healthy way anymore. Because I do think God calls people out to different places. I think
for sure.
I think there's not a sense of, I can't think like, man, we have the only church that matters, is the only church people should attend. It's not that thing. But I do think there's a healthy way to communicate, like, hey, man, God's called us to another place. People don't do that. And I think the reason why is because in our modern culture, church is no longer a community of believers. It's an event. You don't try to get connected at an event. You know, when you leave an event or you stop listening to an art, you don't go, you're not walking up the stage, hey, I'm just letting you know, I'm not coming back to your concerts anymore. I'm not listening to music anymore. Well, that's kind of how we view, like,
That's
church
good.
is like, man, what arena am I going to go to today? And sip on my coffee and enjoy some music and a motivational speech and then go home.
I love how we talked about the conversation of the church around the table and church around the stage. Both are important, but the church around the table should fuel the church around the stage,
Absolutely.
not the stage fueling the table.
Yes.
And it literally, the mindset, it opens up so much because it's like, man, what God is doing on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, man, I cannot wait to gather with my people on Sunday because of his goodness throughout the week. Not, I've had, man, my week has drained me. Let me go to church so I can feel better for Monday.
Yeah, man.
So it just changes the outlook on church.
Well, and going back to our previous episode, it's like because of this modern culture of church, it really is like, man, I want to go where I can hear my favorite song. It really is. It's like an event.
Yeah.
It's not, man, I'm going to gather with my people today.
Yeah.
To worship the Lord together, serve together, give together, do all those things. So let's talk about the way forward. We talk about, we've gotten to the root, we've confessed, we've confronted. Now let's construct. Let's give some people some tools to help cultivate this community. And the first one I would tell people, man, it's going to require work. It is hard.
Very.
I think we were talking off air. Share a little bit about, like, when you got married to Lindsay, how your whole life was pretty much turned upside down.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So when me and Lindsay got married, we were kind of stuck in this weird.
How old were y'all when you got married?
We were 21 in 2015.
Yeah. 21.
Yeah, 21 years old.
So think about this. The average age of people getting married now is over the age of 30.
Yeah. Which is insane.
Yeah.
I think there's some good to that, but also some not so good to that. Yeah, we were in this awkward spot to where, like, okay, we're one now. We're becoming adults, young adults. We're not 17 anymore, but we're also not 35 with kids. And we found ourselves in this awkward position. It's super awkward.
Because your friends that you went to school with are not getting married.
They're not getting married. They're not talking about a house, family one day where me and Lizzie, hey, we do want a couple kids, and talking about having those types of conversations. So we were in this weird season, and even some of those, like you said, left. Some of those I still talk to today. Everything's all good, but we weren't necessarily doing life with those people anymore. Yeah. But we also weren't doing life with people that were married either. So, like, it was hard. Yeah. It was very hard. And like, there were times where it's like, was there something else out there? You know what I mean? Yeah. Maybe, is there anybody our age? Yeah. Our church was young at that, young during that time period. You either had that spectrum of teenager, or we have 3 kids, and we were kind of stuck in the middle there.
And what most people do is, like, I want to go find somewhere that will do it for me.
Yes.
Instead of cultivate it myself.
Yes.
And I think you and Lindsay are doing a great job of, like, how do we cultivate community ourselves?
And it was hard. Yeah. We wanted to not do it. But now I look at some of the relationships that we have today. I'm 31 today. And it's like, man, I'm glad we stayed the course. We stayed consistent and let some of our troubles be our training.
Absolutely, man. Well, and I just tell people, like, my friends can't, if you stay up past 8:30, we can't be friends.
Sorry, I got stuff to do in the a.m.
I got to go to sleep, bro. So the second thing I would say, it requires vulnerability and authenticity. And again, I said, like, if you think about the definition of the word vulnerable, it means you're out there, right? You're vulnerable for attack, for pain, whatever it may be. But it is the way of Jesus.
Yeah.
The way of Jesus is vulnerability, authenticity. It's honesty. It's basically saying, like, if I'm putting myself in position to be hurt, I can't be surprised when I actually am hurt.
Yeah.
Because I think there's, like you said, the training process, like, you may have to go through a couple of seasons before it's like, we finally found it. We found the community. We found the people. And so, again, I think it takes vulnerability, authenticity. I think it requires selflessness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talked about the definition of love today. Love is seeking the betterment of the other person over yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And most people, they don't approach relationships that way. It's, how can this relationship benefit me? Instead of, like, where's a place where I can plug in to be a betterment to my community?
Mm-hmm.
The other one, it requires discipleship.
Yeah.
You know, like, in all honesty, most of us haven't submitted to discipleship of, like, Jesus, teach me how to be a person who lives in the community of Christ with other believers. We want everyone to conform to our view and our way of community. It's why most churches, I think it's fascinating when you read through the New Testament, here's what you won't see. You won't see, and I'm not, again, none of these things are bad or wrong, but I just want you to see what we tend to do. There's no student ministry. There's no young adult ministry. There's no seniors ministry. There's no couples ministry. There's no, dating ministry. There's no college age ministry. Yeah. So what we tend to do is say, like, man, it's really hard for me to integrate into the local church, so I just want to hang out with my group of people. So start something for my group of people. When really the church should be asking themselves, how do we, because here's the thing, we've created all those things and people still leave the church.
Yeah.
Because when they leave that season, they don't know how to integrate into the next one.
That's good.
One of the greatest things God did for me and Jessica when we got married, we were young. She was 19. I was just turned 25. And we went to a church where we were probably 2 out of the 6 people around our age. Actually, we were the youngest people there, adult-wise.
Yeah.
And so we would spend a lot of time with our pastor and his wife and a few of the deacons. And one of the deacons, I mean, they were in their 60s. But man, we learned so many valuable things by spending so much time with them about marriage, about life, relationships. They were incredible examples for us. And I look back and I'm like, I'm grateful for that. Like, I may have not seen it then. Yeah. I may have complained, like, man, I wish there were more couples in our season of life. But man, it actually matured us. Yeah. And so I think we discount that, man, the teenager can learn from the 50-year-old and vice versa. That's what I love about our student ministry. You'll see small group leaders that are in their early 20s and small group leaders who are in their 50s and 60s. Yeah. That is what the church of Jesus should look like. Same thing with our kids ministry. Like, there should be all through the age spectrum for that encounter to happen.
That's good. I think a lot of times we spend too much time on what we can't do rather than what can I do. I have conversations with a young man, and no, we don't have a young adult ministry, generation young. No, we don't have that. However, though, it was very encouraging to, like, talk through what you can do with some people your age. And now there's a D group that has started, and they're building foundational They are doing these very things, building community. And it's like, I don't know what the Lord's up to with this group of people, but I do know, let's say that does happen one day. They're going to have some foundational roots in who they are, what they believe, a group of people that can confess things to. They're studying scripture with each other. And it's like, I think sometimes we want this product, but we're not willing to, like, develop any kind of foundation.
Well, it's the people, like, they'll come to me like, you know what we should do? We should do a young adult ministry. That sounds amazing. Why don't you do that?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I don't.
Because, like, it's so funny how people, like, implant ideas into me because they want you to go have somebody else do it. And it's like, well, maybe the Lord put it on your heart for a reason. Yeah. You do it.
You do it.
You know? Because, honestly, I don't have the time to do that.
The capacity.
Yeah. So I think discipleship's a big deal. And I think people have to be able to say, man, I need to learn from people outside my season of life. If not, all you're getting is people speaking. You're listening to an echo room.
Yes.
Because if you're 21 and all you hang out with is 21-year-olds, you're only getting 21-year-old maturity.
Yes.
21-year-old wisdom. And so where are you getting wisdom that's not in the same echo room?
Yeah. And I, as a youth pastor, I got to be mindful of that. It's like if all I'm hanging around is teenager, which I think that'd be bad
Before
news.
you know it, you're going to be wearing socks in the swimming pool, bro.
And you know what? If I do that, somebody say something, please.
Oh, I will hold you accountable.
Yeah.
Church
but it's like
discipline.
if all I hung out with around is teenagers, then I'm probably going to be acting like teenagers. It's like there is that arena, but it's also people my age and also people who are older than me. Their kids are older than me that I can learn from.
That's good.
And so I want to encourage, if you are a student pastor, or anybody in that regards, have people around you of all ages.
Yeah, man.
Because you can invest in those people that are coming up behind you as well.
Yeah. Last but not least, I think it requires consistency.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me how many people will have one or two bad experiences and they just quit showing up. And it's like, you don't do that in any other arena of your life. Like some people complain about McDonald's all the time, and yet they still show up and give them their money in the drive-thru.
And they're going to make you pull up.
And it's like, how many times has McDonald's hurt you, bro? And yet you haven't given up on them yet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so, I think, that's the thing. Like Chick-fil-A could hurt my feelings every day. I'm still showing back up.
I'm getting me that
I'm
sandwich.
I'm coming back, man.
You didn't say my pleasure, but that's okay.
I forgive you.
Yeah, you're forgiven.
Because here's what's fascinating. If you go to the airport one, they don't say my pleasure, man. Those people, they're not Christians. But you know what? I'm still buying the little minis, chicken minis. Come on, bro. So, man, I think that's the key. I think if we're going to construct it, it's going to require work. It's going to require authenticity, vulnerability, selflessness, discipleship, consistency.
That's good.
And so, man, great episode.
Yeah.
Looking forward to some more conversation. Man, don't forget, hit us up, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music. Subscribe, follow, share, get the word out there as this podcast gets taken off. And remember to stay rooted, because if you want the fruit, you have to get to the root.